morning and welcome to Matt Nair on Air. Jane Matt Nair, Greg Bach, Calvinator on the board, coming to you from our studio at Radio Park in Racine, where you can always join us. Call or text. The number is the same at 855-752-4842. You can also leave a comment if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. We are delighted to be joined by New York Times bestselling author and the author of the award-winning Substack called For Such a Time as This. Andra Watkins joins us. Good morning, Andra. Thanks for being here. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
We are good. We are surviving. We are plugging along, as it were. We have a lot to cover this morning. Before we jump into Christian nationalism and who falls under the definition of left, because I think that's going to surprise many, many, many people, let's talk about Robert Morris just for a little bit. Robert Morris, for people who don't know, is the founder of a megachurch, pastor of one of the largest megachurches in the country. He pled guilty to sexually abusing a 12-year-old girl. The 64-year-old Morris, of course, was one of Donald Trump's spiritual advisors. He began abusing this woman when she was 12. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He's going to get 6 months.
And she's whirling. Go ahead.
There seems to be a lot of this within the clergy and within megachurches.
She's going to carry that for the rest of her life, and he gets 6 months. It's just abominable for people to let them get away with this. And
absolutely.
It is a very common thing.
At one point, his lawyer wrote a letter saying that she had to accept some culpability for this. She was 12.
Yeah, and you know, we've talked about this before, but there are hopefully lots of new people here who haven't met me. So the reason that they would say something like that is because they adhere strictly to the doctrine of original sin, which is the interpretation of the Bible that St. Augustine invented 2,000 years ago because he was a sex addict and went into the church to stop being a sex addict. So these men never change. And came up with the fact that because Eve sinned first and tempted Adam to fall with her, the woman is originally responsible for sin and has to be subject to the man and has to submit to him and has to be blamed all the time for tempting him. And men really can't help it when they do bad things. You know, it's the woman's fault that she tempted him. So that lawyer statement is a reflection of this doctrine of original sin that these Christian nationalists adhere to keep from blaming the man because he can't control himself.
Wait, I have no culpability. I'll see you guys. I'm out of here.
Sit down.
All right.
Sit down. You're not going anywhere. I just want to make sure I understand this. Men are so strong, and the head of the household,
absolutely,
and the enforcer of, you know, he's following God's law in being the head of the household, but he is so weak and so fragile that we have to protect men from scary ladies.
Yes, and women, that was what I was taught as a child in Christian nationalism. Women have to control themselves all the time because men can never control themselves. It's never a man's fault when he does something like that. It's always the woman's fault because she wore the wrong thing, or she looked at him the wrong way, or she giggled at him coyly, or, you know, she walked a certain way, or she sat a certain way, or she got up from a chair a certain way, or she just generally existed.
She is.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah,
she existed.
She is.
And for me, you know, as a man, it's not just that. It's also the fact. It's not even the trying to strip any sort of accountability from the man, but it's also that of you know, it's tough It's just so guys, it's tough, man. He was just trying to live his life, and he saw a 12-year-old over there, and he's like, "Oh, my base instinct is to do something horrible." And what was he? Let's just have a moment to feel sympathy for this guy. And I'm thinking about this, and I wish I would have gotten the name of this gentleman, but he got up in front of his megachurch and he admitted to wrongdoing on this level of being in inappropriate relationships, and he did it with self-reflection in his tone, and his head was hung low, and I'm sure there was a crocodile tear there. The entire church got up and clapped for him.
Yeah.
And he was off the hook.
They are conditioned to forgive the man for anything. He said he was sorry. He's repented. We saw this with Pete Hegseth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he assaulted multiple women allegedly, but you know, he asked for forgiveness. He repented publicly. Then he turned around and did it again. Well, but he asked for forgiveness and he repented publicly, so we don't need to punish him anymore. He's paid his price. He's sorry. Let's move on. That's how they operate. And these girls and young women are scarred for life and have to carry that with them for life.
And these girls and young women are groomed for this, right?
Yes.
Because you do not question authority. You never question your spiritual leader, ever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, so when your spiritual leader of a mega church of 10,000 people is telling you it's God's will that I touch you here, and we just don't need to tell anybody, you know, this is a super special spiritual thing between you and me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a child,
Yeah.
You're 12, you know, you don't know that that's inappropriate. Many of the people in these communities, especially, I mean, you don't know how sex works. You're not taught about your body.
Yeah,
you don't know any of that. So this kind of inappropriate touching and interaction, you may think, well, this is weird. This is embarrassing, but you don't really understand that it's sexual assault.
If you're just joining us right now on Matt and Aaron Air, we're speaking to Andra Watkins, who is a New York Times bestselling author. I told her this last time. I love saying that, New York Times bestselling author. Also the author of the award-winning Substack For Such a Time as This. She is a survivor of the white Christian nationalist community, which, as you put it many months ago, and I always want to, I put this in the notes, and I always say it out loud when people can hear me, that these are people not on the fringes. They are in the halls of power. And I think that attitude, Andra, that you are speaking of, where we just submit our personal morals because God has got a plan, and that means that so-and-so must have done this to this young child. So therefore, it's not for me to understand. I feel like that attitude has been mainstreamed and almost secularized because we see this type of action being busted all the time. Cops, clergy members, teachers being arrested for assault, if not absolutely worse, of children. And what we do is we say, well, the job is a lot of pressure, or they got a lot going on, and we don't know the situation. And I think in a certain sense, and tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like we as a community, as a society, do that for our own comfort, because to go deeper into it and hold accountability to these individuals, we then have to look into the nuanced topics of their professions, which usually grant them power. And these are usually men, not always, but usually men. But it's a lot easier to say, well, we just don't know, and walk away with our lives, which are busy, instead of saying we need to do something about it. Because frankly, if we were to do something about this, it would take forever because it's always happening.
Yes. And our government is shut down right now to avoid looking at this with the Epstein files.
Oh
you know, I'm convinced that's why the government shut down.
Absolutely.
Because they don't want that to come out. So, and that's a whole nother set, like you said, Greg, of secularizing, you know, many wealthy, powerful, mostly men, abusing young girls, little girls, and young women for decades and getting away with it. So, you know, this is something about our society that we're perpetuating, and this idea that is baked into all of these religions, from Judaism to Islam to Christianity, of this story of the woman being at fault and the woman being a temptress, is where they are able to encode that degree of patriarchy and female control into all of society. So even people who haven't grown up in this or been exposed to it still have that view because it is so pervasive.
Here is my question to you. If say I am in one of these churches, a Christian nationalist church, and the man is the head of the household, and my husband decides to do something completely moronic. He's going to jump off the roof into a vat of Jell-O, whatever. And I go to my faith leader and I say, my husband wants to do this thing that's really dangerous and stupid. Should I do this with him? Should I also jump off the roof into a vat of Jell-O? What is their explanation then? That you still submit to the moron?
You know, in general, in a lot of these churches now, you have to sign some kind of contract of conduct. I had to sign a standard of conduct to be in the school when I was in junior high and high school. We had to sign one of these things, and a lot of these churches have them. So one of the things that happens with that is the church has the right to discipline you for going against the standard of contract. So, and the church leaders decide when that applies. So if the church leadership decided that not jumping off a roof into a vat of Jell-O with your husband was not properly submitting to him, then you could be punished publicly in the church for not submitting to your husband. So, you know, it really is interpreted in these churches on a church by church basis.
And a case by case basis, I would imagine.
And a case by case basis, because there are people, you know, if you're a really good tither and you give a lot of money, you know, then probably they're going to go easier on you than if you're just to show up sometimes and do the bare minimum kind of person.
Andrew, I want a really quick. I'm going to make this question very quick because we have to go to grab some snacks and some water. But of these individuals, because you saw this firsthand in your experience, with no support from the church, no support from parents, no support from their community, these young people, young women and girls, have to just stay in the church. They don't probably leave because they don't have the power or the authority within them to do that. What is the percentage you see now, then or now, of young people who are just like, I got to get out of here, or they're just like, there's nothing I can do because it's God's will and I have to stay and endure?
If that had happened to me, I would have been in the it's God's will and I have to stay and endure.
You would have.
And a lot of people would have been, because they don't. I didn't have a choice about where I went to school or went to church. That was my parents' decision. I did not have any say in that. You know, and I wasn't particularly rebellious. So a lot of people will stay because they don't feel like they have another choice.
Well, and again, if your education is so intentionally limited, that makes it even more difficult for you to get out into the regular world and function. We're going to continue our conversation with Andra Watkins, New York Times bestselling author and author of the award-winning Substack For Such a Time as This. Stay with us. You are listening to Matt and Air on Air. Good morning. Welcome back to Matt and Air on Air. Jane Matt and Air, Greg Bach, our resident young person, Calvin on the board, coming to you from our studio at Radio Park in Racine. Join us, call or text at 855-752-4842. Leave a comment if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. We do have baseball later on this afternoon. Brewers at Wrigley against the Cubs. Our broadcast starts at 3:30. You can listen on terrestrial radio. Listen to the crew on WRCE in Richland Center. Here in Racine and Kenosha on WRJN. Park Falls, WCQM. And in beautiful Hayward, WBZH. Cubs hosting crew. 3:30. Our broadcast starts this afternoon. First pitch goes out at 4:08. You got a compliment on your jersey there, Greg Bach.
What's up, everybody?
Andra, your husband's a Brewers fan.
Yes, lifelong. He used to go sit and watch them on the grass when they were in the old stadium. He would sit in the back on the free seats in the grass when he was a kid. So he's been watching them his whole life.
Nice. Andra Watkins is our guest. She's a New York Times bestselling author and also author of the award-winning Substack called For Such a Time as This. I highly encourage you to subscribe. We will include the link in our show notes. One of your latest columns, Andra, are you talking about when Christian nationalists say the left, who are they talking about?
And it's such a good point to make, and I'm so glad you asked me to do this. And for people who are visual people, I made a video of this on my Substack that you can go find so you can see it, because we're on the radio, you can't see it here. But I'll do my best.
All right.
So, most people think, sane people think that, ideologies exist on a spectrum. So we have people who are on the far left. We have people who are on the far right. We have a lot of people who are in between. We have people who are in the middle. We have center right. We have center left. And people hit multiple points in that spectrum. And that means a certain thing, in terms of what they believe. But when somebody like Kevin Roberts, who's president of the Heritage Foundation, which authored Project 2025 that I wrote about last year and warned people not to vote for,
Yep.
When somebody like him says we're in the midst of the Second American Revolution and it will be bloodless if the left allows it to be, which I interpreted it as, is if you resist, we will kill you, and how I interpret that statement. But, when he says the left in that context, you have to understand that somebody like him, a diehard Christian nationalist, an Opus Dei Catholic, allegedly, who's in that cult of Christian nationalism, who's very, very far right, but rigid. We can't compromise with anybody. Our interpretation of God's law should be the Bible. And we are right, and anybody who disagrees with us is wrong, and we will not compromise an inch. We caught Sam Alito saying that on the hot mic last summer. So we can't compromise. So they very much believe that. So say you voted for this 3 times, which would make you think that you're probably over there with Kevin Roberts. You're on his team fully, but you're okay with same-sex marriage because your cousin is gay and married to a man married to a man. So you're okay with that. You carve out, it's okay. You're the left to somebody like Kevin Roberts, because anyone who does not agree with him 100% about everything is the left, because he cannot compromise. So millions and millions and millions of Americans think they're not in the crosshairs of this regime because, they're not left-wing radicals. But anybody who doesn't agree with them is a left-wing radical. The Pope now is a left-wing radical because he said being pro-life means that you need to be against the death penalty. And being pro-life means you need to take care of immigrants and treat them like human beings. And there was all this outrage within MAGA because that's radical left. Disagreeing with them at all means you are a radical left liberal.
And need to be destroyed.
Yes.
Or saved.
Do they even think
I don't
we're
think
worth
they
saving?
care so much about the save part anymore.
Okay. So the question I have then, and you've spoken on this before, in fact, you spoke on this when the first time you were ever here then, is you have someone like that gentleman, Opus Dei Catholic. Then does he see Mike Johnson as the left because he's not the same Christian nationalist as he is? They're different sides of the coin.
Flavors.
They're different flavors of Christian nationalism. So is it a matter of whomever is on the top of the mountain wins and everyone below them, even if they are just as devout in their Christian nationalism, but you're not a Catholic? Sorry, back of the line, or it's no longer a bloodless revolution.
Eventually, we will get to that if they consolidate enough power, where an Opus Dei Catholic has been schooled to say all people have to be Catholic. And so someone like Mike Johnson is Baptist, therefore he's not a real Christian to someone like Kevin Roberts or Sam Alito. So they will have to have a war about whose version of faith they're going to have to force on everyone, because they don't agree about who's going to heaven.
And I want to repeat something, too, you've been saying more and more, too. This is white Christian nationalism. This isn't Christian nationalism. This isn't an all-encompassing, super inclusive Christian nationalism. This is white Christian nationalism.
Yes. And it's just, there are 3 sectors of it: the Catholic sector, the Baptist Protestant Presbyterian sector, and the Dominionist New Apostolic Reformation sector that have distinct views about who's going to heaven.
You started writing about Project 2025 long before anybody else did. We talked about it. That's why we started having you on in the first place. They've gotten pretty far already with implementing parts of Project 2025, which we'll talk about more the next time you join us. Andra Watkins, New York Times best-selling author. Subscribe to her Substack for such a time as this. Always appreciate your time, Andra. It's so enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. News coming up next. And then we're going to talk to Darren Von Ruden from the Wisconsin Farmers Union. Stay with us. This is Matt Nair on Air, coming to you across the vast, statewide, countrywide. You can pick us up around the world on this Civic Media Radio Network.